We lost your audio there, Paul.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, sounds good.
Did you hear anything at all that I just said?
Not the last 2 minutes or so.
Interesting. I'm wondering how I muted myself. Apparently, I muted myself. All right. So, for those online, just a quick introduction, and I think you all know who I am. So we'll jump in here as well. Jason, thanks for letting me know. Tonight we're going to cover basics of batteries, what they are, lead acid batteries, kind of the old standby that we're familiar with. We'll talk about, in general, just the generic category of lithium chemistry batteries, and that is really a pretty broad category, as you'll see. We'll home in on just a little bit on lithium iron phosphate batteries, and you'll hear them called LiFePO4 or any number of acronyms. I prefer LFP. It's easier to say, so I'll refer to them frequently as LFP batteries throughout the presentation and in the conversations that I have with most of you otherwise. We'll talk a little bit about some design considerations for LFP battery systems, and then we'll talk through a high-capacity battery build that I put together with cells that I sourced from China as individual cells and put together into really my own battery. So some basics on batteries. We know that they're made of different cells. They kind of get stacked together. There's a picture up here that shows what they look like. But each chemistry for that battery, of the construction of that battery, has a different characteristic voltage. And those can work for us or against us. And so you see some numbers up there. We're all familiar with the standard dry cell batteries. The old standby of the first rechargeable batteries that we ever had with the nickel chemistry in there. I mentioned lead acid batteries. We're familiar with those, whether they're absorbed glass mat or flooded lead acid or gel cells. They're really the same at that standard 2.1 volt characteristic voltage. And that's really driven a lot of the design considerations for our gear. And in turn, now we're trying to match batteries back to our gear. And so it's kind of interesting how a battery chemistry set our voltages, and now we're trying to match batteries back to that. So we'll talk through that and why certain chemistries are ideally suited for what we do, particularly as hams. Lithium iron phosphate, you'll see there, has a much higher per cell voltage, and then lithium ion anywhere from 3.6 to 3.7. You'll see different numbers out there. But the key here is that they're made of different cells stacked together, and that's the same principle in the large battery here, just the cells happen to be a lot larger physically. Lead acid we're all familiar with, and I mentioned that our equipment is really designed around this lead acid standard, particularly our mobile equipment, but even our other equipment that runs on direct DC has really adopted that same standard. So we often toss out this generic 12 volt as being, our 12 volt, system. It's really not. We're designed largely, and check the nameplate of your equipment, but we're designed largely around a 13.8 volt standard, plus or minus about 15%. So that really all comes down to the fact that a 6-cell battery is 12.6 volts nominal. You need some overhead to charge it, which is in our car. That gets us up to that 13.8 volts, and then some buffer on either side for over voltage and under voltage there. So pros and cons, and usually I list the cons first and then we hit the pros. So these do not like to be discharged very deeply. The actual usable capacity compared to what the nameplate capacity is usually around 20% at most before you start damaging the batteries. So you might have, as I did several years ago, I still do have almost a 100 amp hour battery, but I can really only use about 20 to 25% of that, even as a discharge or a deep discharge absorbed glass mat battery. So fairly high end, very expensive battery, but I can only use a small portion of it. They're heavy. We know that. The lead's right in the name there. And they have a very limited shelf life. So even though we may not use them, lead acid batteries are subject to aging. So there's a chemical aging that takes place within the chemistry of the cell itself that causes those cells to be less productive for us. But they're ubiquitous. They're around us everywhere. We know that we've got them, and they're very familiar. And they're a great direct match because we designed our equipment around this standard. That brings us to lithium chemistry, and you'll see a whole bunch of acronyms there, and that's why I kind of like these three letters in here. So you get into some of these like, lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese oxide, and you start, reading out the chemical formula of it. It's just unwieldy. So NMC becomes commonplace. LTO for lithium titanate. Our favorite here, our darling of the evening, the lithium iron phosphate, and there are any number of batteries out here, and they range in voltage based upon the chemistry that they're built around. So some of those, like the lithium titanate batteries, can be as low as 2.4 volts per cell. You need a lot more of those to stack up. I've got some charts here in just a few minutes that'll kind of show how those chemistries stack up and why the lithium iron phosphate is so beneficial. Clint, if you want to show around, actually, I should probably show both of those. So the first one coming around that's fairly heavy, there's a little post-it note on the back side, is a traditional nickel cadmium. I can't tell you, but yep. So that's a whopping 9.6 volts, and I think it's 600 milliamp hours if memory serves. And then the others, I've got some standard lithium primary cells that are not rechargeable, as well as some lithium pouch cells. And I mentioned there that the lithium batteries can come in different formats. We're familiar a lot of times with, we use these terms a lot of times to just describe them. 18650. Well, it's 18 millimeters by 65 millimeters, and it describes the physical characteristics of that cell. Whether they're cylindrical or pouches. So you'll look on the ones that are coming around, you'll see some numbers there that describes the dimensions of the package. So some pros and some cons. Number one, these are very sensitive to both over voltage and over current. So you've all seen the news media reports of somebody's scooter that's going up in flames in the garage. It comes down to needing a very robust protection circuit that keeps it from overcharging and keeps it from over delivering the current, because there's a lot of angry pixies in each one of those. You'll see some of those pouch cells are easily 4 times the capacity of the nickel chemistry cell that's coming around, and they want to deliver it now. They're capable of delivering high amounts of current in a very short period of time. That's one of the great things about lithium batteries. So it's important that we have these protective systems in there, that we have what's called a BMS, or a battery management system, that takes care of all of these things to help keep us safe, such as over voltage, over current, cell balancing, locking us out if we get too high or too low, and then also gauging. One thing that we see with lithium batteries in particular, with lithium iron phosphate batteries, is the discharge curve is very, very flat. So it's hard to measure the actual capacity that we have remaining simply by gauging a voltage. Whereas with lead acid, we can stick a meter on it and have a real good sense of that, because the charge curve there is fairly linear. On the whole, lithium ion batteries are not a great match for ham radio equipment. You'll see in the charts on the following slides here. So we need some sort of voltage regulation. That could be buck or boost, depending on where we're at. That has a potential of introducing noise, particularly on HF, as the switching circuitry in there helps to match the voltage to what we need. But these are really available. They're very common in consumer equipment, and really fairly low cost. The technology has really gotten pretty robust on our lithium ion batteries. So when we start talking about batteries, we talk through pack configurations, and we'll use a lot of times an S and P notation there. So S stands for series, and P stands for parallel. So we might talk about a string of cells being a 3S 2P. That's 3 cells in series, and then 2 groups of those in parallel. So a total of 6 cells, 3 in series, 3 more in series, and those two in parallel with each other. We might have a 4S1P. This is actually a 4S1P battery up here that I built. It's 4 cells in series, and one parallel is just one, so it's just 4 individual cells. So as you see this around, and here on this chart, we've got 3S, 4S, 5S. We're talking about how many cells in series. When we start adding in parallel, per Ohm's law, we're just simply boosting the capacity of that, not the voltage individually. So what we see here is that with lithium ion on a 3S or 3 cells in series, it gets us to about 10.8 volts, not enough for what we need to do. 4 gets us to 14.4. We're now over or bumping up against the top limit of what our equipment can comfortably handle. So we may need to have a buck boost converter in there to keep us from exceeding and prevent us from drawing the cell too low on the other end. And then a 5S pack bumps us way up. We're over 18 volts. And so what we've got, this is from a ham AI6MS, Marcel Stieber, who's done a lot of presentations on batteries. And the green shows the range of our radio, and then a lead acid battery, and a 3S, 4S, and 5S configuration where they fall kind of in that generic range. And so you can see that lithium-ion batteries in themselves are not a great match for our equipment here. Enter our darling, and that's the lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery. And I use the term up there. Maybe it's a little clickbaity, if you will, but it really, in many ways, is kind of a Goldilocks battery for our applications. If we put 4 in series, we really end up with a maximum of 14.4 and minimum of 10 volts, and we've got less than 5% of the capacity of the battery that's usable. That's really down in that range. So it really is a very close match for the lead acid batteries that our equipment is largely designed around. So if you match up the mobile radio, it really overlaps nicely with the lithium iron phosphate battery. Some pros and cons. We mentioned that lithium batteries like to go up in flames. It's not to say that lithium iron phosphate won't, but they tend to be a lot more stable and a lot safer battery overall. They're less susceptible to accelerated heat discharge with rapid discharge. They do have a significantly greater charge discharge cycle than any other battery chemistry out there. And it's not uncommon to see these in the 2,000 or 3,000 cycle for a first quality cell. So that's by first quality, I mean it's the first cut grade A cell. You'll find, and this is a caution we'll talk about here a little bit later, that as you're shopping for cells, you get what you pay for. And if you're buying a battery online that's cheaper than everything else, it's likely that it's not using first quality cells, because there is a cost associated with it. And as with anything else in engineering, there's no free lunch. So you're trading off maybe quality or performance. It's still going to do what you need, but maybe you'll only get 1,000 cycles out of it, or 1,200 cycles out of it, or maybe it doesn't have as much performance or capacity. Realistically, is it going to work for most of what we do? Absolutely. We're going to take it out. We're going to use it. Are we likely to see? I mean, if you start thinking about how often we're actually using our batteries, 2,000, 3,000 cycles is a significant lifespan for us. They do have good storage parameters, so they don't self-discharge greatly, but we'll talk about a little bit of a caveat there. And they're not subject to the calendar aging that we see with lead acid batteries, so they don't deteriorate just sitting on the shelf. A typical lead acid battery is got about a 5-year lifespan before your capacity is really gone. We talked about the match there. They do have lower energy density. So if you start comparing the size and the weight of a lithium iron phosphate, we've got iron in the name. So we've got a little weight in the chemical formula there. They do weigh more than traditional lithium ion batteries, but trade-offs. They're better suited for what we need, and they're a little bit safer overall. They do end up more expensive, quite a bit more expensive than a lead acid battery. You'll see up there for the initial acquisition. But when you factor that out over the total cost on a per cycle, per amp hour basis, they've got about 4 times the cycle life and conservatively about 2 times the usable capacity for the same total nameplate capacity. And so the cost per cycle, the cost per amp hour really decreases with lithium iron phosphate batteries compared to lead acid in particular. So a few caveats. I mentioned that there's no free lunch here. So they should not be stored at a full charge. So ideally, as you start reading the battery literature from the manufacturer and the data sheets that go with them, they should be somewhere around 30 to 50% for long-term storage. Now that becomes a little challenging for us because a lot of times we want our battery ready to go when we're ready to either hop in the car or we have an emergency. And so just understand that by keeping it at full charge, you are impacting the lifetime of that battery. So you might opt to keep it at 60 or 70 or 80%, top it off before you need it if you know that you've got something coming up, but understand that impact there. So they want to be in for long-term storage in that happy range. Now, if you're charging it and discharging it every month, not a big deal. It's really that long-term storage, and there's lots of information in the data sheets about that. You should cycle your cells at least every 6 months. So they want to be charged or discharged and recharged at least a couple of times per year. For my purposes, I've got events throughout the year. It's a great time. I cycle them down, I charge them back up, and life's pretty good. They are very sensitive to overcharging. So a couple of things. You do need a high quality battery management system. Most of the off-the-shelf batteries do include that. But you also need to use a lithium iron phosphate specific charger that has that charge profile for a lithium iron phosphate battery. And it's going to deliver the right amount of current during the really kind of, it's an outdated term, but kind of that bulk charge phase. And then that top-up phase, it's going to transition to a constant voltage mode to bring it up to a fully top. One thing to keep in mind, these batteries will be catastrophically destroyed if you charge them below freezing. A lot of battery management systems or battery protection systems will take that into account and prevent charging if it senses that it's below freezing. But just know that charging that battery below freezing will destroy it. Catastrophic damage. So know your equipment. A lot of equipment or a lot of batteries have protections in them. Some do not. So I've not played with Bioenos specifically. I don't know if they have temperature compensation. I have not found any information that indicates that they've got that temperature monitoring. I said compensation, but temperature monitoring. But just know your equipment. My large battery here specifically has temperature sensors in the cells or attached to the cells, and it will prevent charging if it drops below 33 Fahrenheit. So yes. Yes. Yeah. So there is a range below which discharging can also damage them, but we're down below like minus 20 C. So it's fairly low temperatures for us. And if we're already using them, they're going to self-generate some heat that's going to help keep them warm as they're discharging. So that self-generation means that for most purposes, we can use them when it's really cold outside. We just need to make sure that they warm up above freezing before we charge them. And understand with that there is a fairly large mass with some of these. So just because the outside feels warm doesn't mean the inside is. I give mine plenty of time to warm up before I throw them on the charger. Yeah. Yeah, mine does not. My BMS does not. But I just, for me, I'm using it regularly enough that leaving it at full charge or close to full charge has not been an issue. So good question. And the final caution here is if it's too good to be true, it is. So the real cheap ones that you find are not going to be as good as top quality cells. You don't want to overpay, There are some premium brands out there, but they also carry extremely long warranties. In some cases, 10 to 12 years that they'll actually warrant their battery to meet the specified parameters. So that brings us really to the question of tonight, and that's, do we build or do we buy? And for a lot of us, buying makes perfect sense. We've got something that's already packaged. It's well designed by the manufacturer. There's some great brands out there that use first quality cells. I've tossed a few up there. You'll see some others around, but they've got a BMS that's going to handle balancing the cells and bringing them to the right levels. Some even include pre-installed Anderson power pole connectors. I'll pass around. Why don't you pass that one around, Clint? That's a fairly small one from BioEnno. And that's how it comes. It comes with power poles already equipped on it. That's a 6 amp hour battery, so it's got a good quantity to it, and but you pay for it as well. So that's in the range, 40 to 80 cents per watt hour, give or take. One thing to keep in mind too is the size of your battery may also be dictated by what kind of operating you're going to be doing. So you'll see a reference in a lot of these batteries to a rating called C, and C is just related to the total capacity of the battery. So if I've got a battery that, let's use this example here, that's a 6 amp hour battery, and it's rated for a discharge rate of up to 1 C, that means I can discharge 1 times its capacity for the length of time that it's out there. So that would be 1 C would be 6 amps continuously until the battery's dead. And they'll usually rate, you can do 2C for 10 minutes or that sort of things, but it's all related to that. So 2C would be 12 amps for the rated period of time. You'll also see reference to the charge parameters in terms of C. And a conservative charge parameter for most batteries is about 0.25 C. You can do less than that. That's not an issue. It's just going to take you longer to get there. But exceeding that can shorten the life of the battery. So in the case there, it would be 0.25 times 6, and that would be our charge there. On the build side, sorry for that slight squirrel. I think it explains well, and I forgot to really include that now that I'm thinking about it in the slides here. On the build side of the equation, we can really get in kind of the comparable range to the low-end batteries, but we can really start to customize the capacity to our specific use case. We can make a conscious choice that we're going to take some batteries that are maybe equipment poles. They're real common in hospital equipment, and they're required periodically to pull those out, even though they've only served maybe half of their useful life. They've still got 1,000 to 1,500 charge cycles in them, but they're required to pull those out. And so you'll see pulls. If you go on some of the battery forums and looking at individual cells, you'll see equipment poles or medical poles listed out there in particular. You could also make an option to use a number 2 cell. And generally what you'll find is that there will be a holographic sticker on it with a QR code. And a lot of times that'll be scuffed off or scratched off. The manufacturer's attempted to say, nope, this isn't meeting our standard. But you can buy those poles knowing that you're not going to get the full nameplate capacity out of them, or maybe the full nameplate number of cycles, but they can be a good value for you if you're looking that way. And we can also customize our battery management system, or BMS. We can go inexpensive, dirt cheap. There's some out there, or we can start getting into more smart BMSs, such as what I've got here, that has Bluetooth and a lot of different parameters that I can tweak and adjust on it. So talking through my particular build here, 12.8 nominal volts nominal output there. It's rated for 120 amps of continuous current delivery, and that's really limited by the BMS. The cells are capable of delivering up to a 1C rate for the duration of their capacity. So if I had a larger BMS in there, I could deliver up to 300 amps continuous for the hour that it would last. That's a lot of angry pixies. And that's the reason that I went with the BMS that I did is I've got a much larger reservoir of charge that I'm going to deliver at a smaller rate there, and it's well within its rated capacity, so I should get good life out of it. I've got 4 45 amp power poles on there. Everybody's familiar with the 45 amp power pole. Clint will pass this around for anyone that needs to see it. And it's also got one rather significant power pole on there that's a PP180. It looks kind of comical in comparison. These are the contacts that go inside it. We're dealing again, remember folks, with some very significant amounts of current. And so we really have to start scaling up the things that we're doing and how we're doing it. There would be other connectors suitable. I went with the power pole because I like the identification of positive versus negative. There are also some Anderson connectors that are just a single molded color. Go ahead and show that one there. So that's an example of the a 75 amp connector that's just a single color. Same contacts. Within the battery here, I've got 4 cells from a company called EVE. There's several different manufacturers out there, and there's getting to be more all the time. And quite frankly, I think that a lot of the acceleration into electric vehicles is going to really kind of harbor a golden age of lithium iron phosphate batteries for us, because they're very well suited for a lot of vehicle applications. They're a little heavier, but they've got a much longer life. They're capable of much longer or greater charge discharge cycles. And so I think we're going to see more manufacturers come in and more stuff related to that. So EVE, CATL, you'll see some out there, Panasonic, Sanyo, but EVE and CATL are the primary manufacturers out of China. I've got a BMS in there that's from a company called Overkill Solar, and I went with them. It's a little more expensive than some of the others that you could get off AliExpress, but I love their warranty. Their warranty is if you blow up your BMS, we'll replace it. We'll refund your money, even if it's your fault. It's honestly pretty remarkable, their warranty there. And so a little bit more expensive getting it that way, but they've got a warranty that they stand behind. I hunted high and low for a case that would work, and Clint knows the agony that I went through to find something that was suitably sized. You want it small enough that you don't have this big bulky container, but as you start building out the battery and you start getting the BMS and you start getting your power distribution and everything else inside there, it necessitates a larger case. And so I landed on the Craftsman Versus Stack toolbox. I think Clint actually found it for me. Lowe's carries it. I picked one up. It was $35. They'll actually stack together. So if I had other batteries or other components, I can do that. Not an advertisement for them, but I've been very happy with it. Watertight seal in the lid, and a nice case to work with. The other thing to consider is when you start getting big in batteries, you got to figure out how to put the Angry Pixies back in. And initially, I tried using a charger that I think it was on initially for like 5.5 days, and I'd barely reached like 60% of capacity. And it's like, this is just not going to work. And so I happened upon a brand called Ames Power, AIMS, not AMES. And Clint, if you want to show it here, I don't know that we need to pass it around because it's a little ungainly, but you're welcome to come up and look at it afterwards. No, there is some battery there, but this is the charger that I settled on. It's intended mostly for RV use, but it's they call it a power converter. Comes in 12 and 24 volt versions, but it's capable of delivering 75 amps continuously, which is well within that 0.25 C rate for charging my battery. So it's a nice match for the 300 amp hour cells there. It is expensive. It's about $200 there, but in the end, that was it was an investment that I felt was important if I was going to have any joy out of this battery, because charging it was taking simply so long at the charge rates that I had. Oops. Did not want to do that. So from a connection, kind of high level, not really schematic standpoint, what we've got here are 4 individual cells. So cell 1, cell 2, cell 3, cell 4. Actually, I did that backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4. Connected in series. So we go positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. These are called bus bars. They bridge between the individual cells and allow for that interconnection without a piece of wire in between. So we're connected to the battery management system on the most negative terminal and on the most positive terminal of this 4S arrangement, 4 in series. We've also got some other wires running in here, and these are called balance or sense leads. So remember, our battery management system is working to keep each of those individual cells at an equilibrium as it's being charged. To a lesser degree as it's being discharged, it's really focused on bringing them up at the same level. And so to do that, we've got individual wires that run to each of these terminals and then back to the battery management system. So what we've got is one at the most positive terminal, one at the most negative terminal, and then at the positive and negative of each of these other battery cells here in the battery. And that just plugs into the bottom of the BMS there as well. At the end, we've got our load or charge there. Obviously, we need some protection in on that, and you'll see that when you look at this here as well, that's built in. But that's at a high level how it connects and what the individual connections do. This is what mine looks like. So this is inside before the cells have actually been inserted. We're looking at the front of the box. So you can see over here on the side, this is that 45 or massive power pole, and then these are the 45 amp power poles. I've got one master positive and one master negative distribution bus. And what I did with these is this is all mounted. I filled in the bottom with some polyethylene pieces, glued those into place with construction adhesive, and then a piece of birch plywood on top of that to give me a nice surface. Anything that's a block here, so for instance, I've got these blocks, screws come up and screws down with some construction adhesive in between. And then the battery is actually held in place with multiple strips of 3M's VHB or very high bond tape to get it into place. So what we're seeing here is the BMS, battery negative, and that runs over to the most negative. And then this is the output that runs to our connection down here for our master negative bus. And then you start to see some of this 2-gauge wire that's running inside, the same stuff that's used on the charger there. Here's a little different angle looking straight down at the top. You can kind of see with a little more light what that looks like. And the inside of the case required me to kind of cut and fit. It's not exactly perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It's simply there to give me a flat surface to build on. In the process, you've got to label wires, and I happened across this stuff that's just absolutely magic, and maybe other people know about it already, but this is 3M's Scotch Code wire marker tape, and it's in a dispenser, so you can actually kind of hit it, peel it out, tear it off. It's got it all built right in, and it runs from 0 to 9. And so I was able to go through and mark, this is connection 1, 2, 3, 4, on down the entire line. Fantastic stuff. You can see there the roll and how it looks wrapped around a piece of wire. I have not. It's all been indoors. I don't know how it would weather outside, Pat. Right. 4-0. It would be interesting to see. We can take a look at it afterwards and see maybe what it's made out of, and someone may know as well. But it is kind of it's got a shiny surface to it, so it's I think there is perhaps some resistance. I don't know that it would be fully waterproof, but be interested to see. I have to do the wrapping. So what I'll do is I'll take it and I'll pull a little bit out. As you pull on it, it actually pulls it out of the roll, and then you can decide how long you want it to be by how long you pull. You bring it up, tear it off, wrap it around, and you're good to go. So anyway, highly recommended. Not a shareholder in 3M, but they make good stuff. So this is kind of as things are starting to come together. It's still a little bit of a rat's nest. I haven't taped everything. I haven't done all of my wire routing or dressing in place. But what I've got is the battery is now fully secured down into place. I've got caps to prevent against something getting dropped down in there to protect the master positive and negative buses. And you'll see each of these balance leads. You can see my little wire markers on these so that I can identify them. And then what I decided to do is to help secure it in the box, even though it was very tightly bound to the bottom, is I took some large chunks of closed cell polyethylene foam that was actually just scrap from work, and cut that to fit and drop that down either side. So it just nicely squishes everything together. One thing to notice well, and you don't see it here, you can kind of see it, is these cells require compression as they're being charged in order to prevent damage. And so that's why you'll see these in like a blue polyethylene wrap in many cases, is that contains it. It holds it in. What I did to keep that compression in place is I took some polyethylene sheet here, some aluminum corner, and then I actually strapped it with two metal bands to pull that together nice and tight. So it's under compression. You can run it without compression, but the specs in the manufacturer's data sheets will warn you that if you do, you decrease the lifespan of your battery somewhere around 15% if it doesn't have that compression to hold it in place. Yeah, they actually get slightly larger and slightly smaller as they're charged and discharged. So really what you're doing is at a low state of charge, you strap them in, and then as they attempt to expand, that compression keeps them there. Really what we're looking at is that mechanical expansion contraction. We're trying to minimize that in that process. So that's one thing that as you kind of go down this path, be aware of. Some guys will just take a whole bunch of electrical tape and wrap around it. I thought about doing it with gaff tape, but at the end of the day, I decided on the metal strapping to hold it together with some polyethylene sheet on the end. You had a question, Wayne? Yes. I'd leave the lid open, but there's not been any appreciable heat. And some of that's because I'm charging at a 0.25 C rate. So it's really fairly slow. And that's the maximum rate. That's the maximum the charger will deliver. I've actually got it dialed in a little bit less than that. But yes, right. Keeps that from happening. Correct. Yeah. And the other thing too is, especially in the RC world, at least my experience is you're charging that battery quite often at a 2C, 4C rate very, very quickly because you want to turn it so that you can get back up in the air again. Um, yes. And a lot of people will do that. So yes, absolutely. So the finished battery, there's a picture here. There's the real life version here. You'll see the 4 Anderson power poles here, and the very large one that I primarily use for charging, but would be fully capable of handling discharge there as well. So some takeaways. First, 300 amp hours is a lot of battery. It's honestly more than I need. Um, but it was an opportunity for me to kind of prove that I could and to learn a lot along the way. It will conservatively run a 100-watt Parks on the Air or Iowa QSO Party station for approximately 72 continuous nonstop hours. That's that's more than my seat in the chair will withstand, and that's based upon the fact that a 40 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery can get me through 12 hours of a full 100-watt sideband station running in contest mode with Q rates in the 115 per hour rate for the duration. So This is high duty cycle, high demand. We're still going to get 3 days out of this thing. It's pretty significant. Cost of materials is a really important factor to consider if you're going this size. You can build smaller ones. You don't have to go with a 300 amp hour cell. You could go much smaller. You could build from smaller cells, cylindrical cells. In this case, these are called prismatic cells just because of their design. But you could go much smaller. But when you do get large, you start having to deal with stuff like 2-gauge wire, which is pretty expensive. If you're buying it by the foot, I found welding lead to be probably the cheapest, and that's what I ended up buying and using. But pure copper and 2-gauge wire, it gets expensive. The safety devices become expensive. I'd originally looked at some fuses and a Class T fuse, which is ideal for working with inverters and that sort of thing. The fuse itself is $65 just for the fuse, and so we start getting into the realm that it becomes a lot more expensive as we're doing it. Specialized tools are likely to be needed, and I've got an example here is to make these battery crimps or the crimps on the terminals. We start dealing with things like a hydraulic crimp tool and needing to actually crimp those connections in such a manner that they're making not just a simple mechanical, but really a fused connection with the wire itself because of the amount of current that we're dealing with. And of course, along with that, we start dealing with lugs that become expensive. And if you want to pass those around, they might be curious to people too. So we're dealing with much larger items and much more expensive. And of course, as I mentioned, you've got to consider how you're going to charge your battery. You can make a great big battery and it can take you 2 weeks to charge it. That's not an ideal situation by any stretch. I mentioned the pain of trying to find a case that fit. You are going to need a bigger case than you think you need. I found one that was an ideal fit. That was a key takeaway for me and something that I would look at in the future. And then overall, I'm very pleased with the Overkill Solar BMS. There's a couple of features that I really like about it. One is that I can connect to it through a USB connection to my PC, and I can set all of the parameters from my desktop. The other thing that's kind of cool is I can actually, and for those that are remote, it won't be quite as cool, but I'll attempt to show you here, is I can connect to my battery over Bluetooth and monitor its performance, the amount of capacity that I've got left, and everything that is going on with the battery. So right now I'm here and I've dialed in. It tells me that I've got 299.52 amp hours remaining, and I can get into each of the individual settings here. So a parameter view, and I've got everything from under voltage, over voltage release, over voltage release delay. The number of parameters that I can adjust are nearly infinite. Now, the recipe out of the box is pretty good, but if you want the ability to tweak those for any reason, then looking at a higher end BMS is certainly worth the investment, in my opinion, because you've got those management tools that go with it. So overall, the big overall takeaway for me is that assembling your own high capacity battery is absolutely feasible. There is a bit of a learning curve and there is a bit of an investment, but at the end of the day, I've got a lot greater understanding of how batteries work, how particularly the lithium iron phosphate chemistry works, and in all, just know that it is something that you can absolutely succeed at should you choose to do so. Yeah, I saw that, Dave. Few resources, and I'll have this posted on my website. Battery University's got a lot of information out there just in general about batteries, how they work, how C rates work. If you want to understand batteries better, it's a great website. Yeah, so if you look right here, I was $975 in the cells, $160 in the BMS, $35 in the case and $225 for the charger. I kind of broke that out separately. So if you look at it there, somewhere around $1,300 for the plus plus wire plus supplies. Those things are a little harder to quantify. But if you look at it on a per watt hour basis, I'm about 35 cents per watt hour. And if you compare to a buy versus build, at 35 cents per watt hour, I'm less than what I could absolutely buy the cheapest battery out there on the market for, which really run in that 40 to 80 cents per watt hour range. So for me, the key was that I got a lot larger battery for less cost than I would have been able to procure commercially. But yes, there is an investment there. And again, this is overkill for most applications, but I think it illustrates, just the scope of what's certainly possible. A lot of these same principles could be carried over to building, a grid tie battery backup system if you wanted to, or integrating with a solar system. That's where a lot of this technology and a lot of this information comes in. I mentioned another resource here. He's got a great YouTube site and a forum out there called DIY Solar Forum. Will Prowse is the guy's name. Young kid, I'd say mid-20s, late 20s. And he's got kind of a happy personality, and he likes to tear stuff apart and shoot straight with his reviews. So I like his information. He's a great resource. Marcel Stieber, I mentioned, the charts are from Marcel's presentations. He's got some great information out there on his QRZ page. And then some other information related to protective systems, wire sizing, how big a wire do you need for how long you're running for either a critical or non-critical type load. Victron Energy is really in that solar and battery space, and a fantastic resource for that. So that's my material for tonight. Open it up here for questions and anything that anyone might have to add.
So most people that are thinking about building a battery are going to put a voltmeter on it.
Yep.
And so explain why you don't have a fuel gauge on this other than your Bluetooth. Why we wouldn't put a voltmeter on that as a fuel gauge?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And I mentioned the charge or discharge curve of a lithium iron phosphate battery in particular is very, very, very flat. So 85% of our battery usage is within about 0.4 of a volt of capacity. And then it drops off the cliff. And so we don't know if we're here on that relatively flat line, or if we're over here on that relatively flat line, if all we're gauging is voltage. And that's why a BMS that allows for really a Coulomb counting type interface, it counts the number of angry pixies that go out, and it counts the number of angry pixies that comes in, and it keeps a tally based upon that of the total capacity. So great question there, Clint. We can't tell just by voltage alone where we're at. Now, I could add something else, but I've got everything here on Bluetooth, and it tells me how much I've got left. And at my current usage rate, how long that's going to last me, it's really pretty robust. Other questions? I'm going to stop the presentation here and stop the sharing so that we can also look online for anyone that's got questions. Klaus. Yes, any charger that's rated for LiFePO or LFP batteries would absolutely be suitable. It's really about, volts are volts at the end of the day, amps are amps at the end of the day. It's just really about ensuring that it's capable of transitioning from constant voltage to constant current and back when it needs to within the charge cycle. Yeah, great question. Wayne.
I would automatically go to discharge. It knows how many times it's been cycled it does a whole bunch of stuff, and then the battery charger knows. You've obviously got a pretty smart BMS. Does it have features like that to?
Yeah, it's all here. I didn't share it on screen, but as I go through, I can look at the history of the battery, and it will tell me what how many times each cell has maybe been overvolt or undervolt, how how it's performed, how it's been charged, how many cycles are on each one, and all of that's available through that app. So. Yep. Yeah, it's all there and available through the app. So I'm looking here, and it tells me, after charging, what the highest voltage, lowest voltage, what the current was, the highest temperature, which cell was the first to reach charge, which one was the last to reach charge, and all of that's available again through Bluetooth directly from the BMS. No, it's got more than I would possibly ever need. So, and that's one of the reasons that I did go down the path that I did, because it's very, very highly rated. As you saw, it's not inexpensive. There are other BMSs out there that I could have picked up that would have handled this in probably the $50 range. But I don't have the amount of features. Yeah. No, I've been very, very happy with it. So, Klaus.
Use like your 75 amp charger for a smaller battery, like the one that you passed around over there?
The issue would be that's not rated for a XC rate. So let's say, for instance, that is a 6 amp hour battery. This charger will put out 75 amps. And that's a massive mismatch. I'm going to overcharge it, as Wayne noted there. Now, there is an adjustment on this that I could turn down the charge current, and theoretically I could adjust that down for that particular battery and back up for the other. For me, it was an investment. I intend to probably have additional batteries and to have this kind of in my arsenal of equipment. So. To a degree, as you can always undersize the charger, just knowing that it's going to take you much longer to get there. But oversizing it, you would risk overcharging your battery. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I've got low voltage cutout set for each individual cell, and if any of the cells reach either a high voltage cutoff or a low voltage cutout, it will shut it off. Yep. It's all solid state through MOSFETs, but yeah, it just switches it off. Correct. It's all being handled there. So if you look at it, I think you can see. Let me find the picture here real quick. This is probably the best one, and I'll share for those that are online here real quick, just so that you can see it as well. So what I'm going to do is just bring this up real quick. You can see how thin this is, I think, fairly well here in this. And let me just match this again, duplicate it here. So that entire BMS, Dave, is about 7/8 of an inch thick. This thickness, this depth right here. And underneath this is all actually functions as some heat sinking into that space should it need it. But the MOSFETs are very low voltage drop, and so they're able to switch that load very, very efficiently without a lot of voltage drop, a lot of heat buildup. So yeah, the entirety, and that's part of its purpose, is it also protects from over discharge. So if it's exceeding 120 amps, it will cut it off at the BMS. I've got short circuit protection in the top of the box, but it will cut it off at the BMS level as well. There you go. Get a little Morse code going, we'd be all set. Great question, Dave. Any other questions here in the room? We're bumping up against the end. I probably got 3 minutes left for questions.
Just tip is never store lithium iron phosphate below 32. Not only don't charge them when you're below freezing, but you know, it used to be like when I was a kid, you maybe store alkaline batteries in the freezer.
Mhm.
Don't do that with the lithium iron phosphate. You will damage the cells. The BMS, does your BMS have a cold temperature cutoff?
It does. Yeah. So inside, and I'll just set that there. I
Sure.
forgot that I've got a mic for you.
Yeah.
So there is, there's actually 2 temperature sense leads, one that I buried between 2 of the cells.
Yeah.
And then one that's on the outside of the entire pack as well. And so it will sense either high temperature if it needs to, over temp, but it's also got a low temp cutoff. So I set mine a little more conservative at 33 F. And so if it gets below 33 degrees, it will not allow charging at the BMS level. I can put as much to the outside as I want.
So you can put a 200-watt heater in there, it'll automatically come on.
I could. And in fact, some batteries that you'll buy commercially actually have a built-in heat mat. And so they'll harvest some of the energy that you're putting into it as a charger to warm the battery. So it'll draw current. You'll think your battery's charging. It's really not. It's just warming this mat to warm the battery up above freezing, and then it will start to dump charge in. Battleborn is a common brand that's out there that utilizes that sort of technology inside their
Well,
cells.
my Tesla does when it's cold
Yeah.
out. So,
Yep.
so what do you actually use this for?
It was just a fun
It
experiment.
was a fun experiment,
Yeah.
Pat, you know?
I mean, you can't.
We used it at Iowa QSO party.
Yeah, we got lucky that we found a motorized vehicle right to the campsite, because it was not gonna be fun to. We had a wagon, we were gonna move it.
And we could have used the 40 amp hour. We could have gotten there. My intention actually is to use this as much for emergency preparedness type stuff, and to pair it up with an inverter that would be capable of delivering high quality AC in kind of a bolt on box. I mentioned that these will stack. My next idea is I'll have an inverter box that I could stack on top of it, plug into the large power pole connection on the front, and pull 120 amps out directly into an inverter.
Run your refrigerator.
I could run my refrigerator. I could run a lot off of that
How long
because
would it last with a linear amplifier for your next
quite a
QSO party?
while. You probably could. I mean, if you think about the power draw of a 100-watt station, that was 100 watts sideband plus the logging PC, and it lasted.
You're barely dipping
Your toe. So for a 12-hour event, yeah, you could easily fire up a QRO station there. Skip.
Suppliers that you've mentioned, would you recommend I get in touch with?
I've got personal experience, and I'll just couch it as that. I've got personal experience with Bioenno, and I know that 40 amp hour battery at 100 watts at contest rates, running my full station and a logging computer, has gotten me through the Iowa QSO party in the past. That's 40 amp hours, and yeah. So.
And I use a 20 amp hour Bioenno for, I think I've got about 150 to 200 POTA activations with that. No issues at all.
Yep.
Hours and hours.
One last question here, and
Of me bugging them, when are you gonna ship my battery? And they finally shipped me, instead of the 40 amp hour, they shipped me 230s with no warning. They just showed up at my door. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm gonna get 230s now. So I have had some issues with them lately on customer service, I would say.
yeah, that was a couple years ago, year and a half ago.
Yeah, just a year and a half.
Yeah, I know they've had some supply chain challenges that might be part of it, but very happy with their product.
Yeah.
And no investment, otherwise it's just, I know their product works and
Yeah.
I've been pleased with it. So we'll take one last question with Klaus here. Yes. Yes, 100 watt hours. Yes.
And 60, you need permission by the airline company and you can only take 2.
Yep.
And then after that,
Then you're done.
all will come.
And I've found that some even have a little higher limit. This is 144 watt hours and is really about the largest you're going to be able to fly with. But that's why I bought this. This is a 12 amp hour bioenno here as well. So, and then I use that little 6 amp hour that I passed around. If I'm operating QRP with my KX3, I just drop that in a little shoulder bag and away I go. So. All right. Thanks, everyone. We are at time, so I'm going to go ahead and transition here to the business portion of the meeting.